I mean, I see why you're wrestling with these every month. I generally do lean to the relationship, and I would rather keep the relationship than the job.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Follow to Lead podcast, a Christian leaders podcast powered by EBEB Solutions, energy benefits for every business. Go to ebebsolutions.com today and learn how you can save actual dollars in tax rebates to help you free up capital and do the work that will advance your company. Again, go to ebebsolutions.com and tell them Tony sent you. Friends, today on the podcast, a repeat offender, Jodi Cowles. She is the COO of Blue Hat Publishing, and she's an incredible writer. In our conversation today, we talk about storytelling, we talk about leaning in, about Ebenezers and reminders, and why it's so important to celebrate the move of God. Her latest book, Along Came Joy, is such a good read. It's so personal, intimate, vulnerable. It's the kind of book that just sits on your heart. I know you're going to love it, and I know you're going to love this conversation. So now, here's a quick word from our partners and my conversation with Jodi. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to have repeat offender Jodi Cowles on the podcast, story writer, Blue Hat Publishing. Jodi, thank you so much for agreeing to come back on.
Such a pleasure. I'm very happy to be here.
So as I mentioned before I hit record, this year on the podcast, we're doing something a little different. We're wrestling with the 12 most Googled leadership questions. And this month's question is all about conflict and tension in the workplace. And specifically, how do we handle it as leaders? And I know that you lead and have led, been involved with people your entire life. Your book is full of people's stories. What are some of the things that you've learned about dealing with conflict and tension when it comes to all the messy people?
That we all are. Sure. The I mean, it sounds cliche, but it really I pray before I engage. I ask the Holy Spirit for help because I am a
Mhm.
conflict avoider and I am a people pleaser, and those are terrible, terrible things when you're trying to deal with conflict. But I pray and then I dive in. Um, I try to have like face-to-face Zoom phone call, at least conversations versus email. Lately, we had a situation where I as a writer, I try to write it out and send a really thoughtful, this is what I want to say email. And then it's taken in, a different way than I intended. So I think my answer is I pray and then I make a phone call or get on a Zoom and just try to talk it out in a longer window than, hey, I only have 8 minutes. Let's solve this.
Mm. One of the things I think is hard about conflict is the relational damage that can happen. I'm always curious. You're a relational person. You tend to lean that way. How do you keep those relational windows and doors open when it's somebody who maybe is on your team or works, I won't say for you, but underneath you in the organizational chart?
I mean, I see why you're wrestling with these every month. I generally do lean to the relationship, and I would rather keep the relationship than the job.
Mhm.
So I have not had to, you know, fire is such a hard word, but I've not had to, part with very many people, but I prefer to part than lose the friendship or the relationship. It's been a struggle for me in business because this is a new role for me. This season of life is a new role, and I very much lean into friendship and relationship and loyalty and finding the balance between we need to do a good job also, most importantly, and being relational and friendly and cutting people off because you only have 10 minutes. It's difficult.
One of the interesting things about your particular setup is you've got a couple of partners who you're pretty close with, and you guys throughout the growth of your publishing company, you guys have taken different roles, and it seems like you guys are finding where your fit is and getting, as they say, the right people in the right seats on the bus. What does it mean to have a partner who's kind of anguishing with you as the company grows? Those toddler years of being a company can be so difficult. What's that been like as kind of clarity and seat assignments and roles, and why don't along the way, why don't you tell everybody what your role in the company is now? Because I think that might be a little different than the last time you came on.
Yeah, it is a little different. I used to be chief fire dowser, but my partner Rachel thought that we needed more grown-up roles. So now I'm chief operating officer, which is much more boring. But yeah, we say I kind of run the company in the background. I do all of the admin and the finances and the invoicing and the making sure that now that we pay our work comp insurance and don't get in trouble with the state and pay our sales tax, all of that. So it's a completely different role than the last time we talked. Oh, and yeah, it partnership. I recently had someone ask me, why don't I just do it on my own? I could
Mm.
maybe do it smaller scale and not have interpersonal conflicts or not have different visions, which our team does not have very much of. The three of us are very close. We talk a lot and we really set our vision before we started. But I not only could not do it alone, I would not do it alone.
Mm.
I value so much being in partnership, being on a team. A small team is totally fine, but having a partner or a couple of partners to just prop each other up when it's hard, because there's always hard parts of just life and work. So I would never go out on my own again. I do have some side gigs, of course, but my partner is my husband in that, and we talk endlessly about our projects. And man, I would never be a solopreneur again.
That's so good. I think it's interesting, because I feel like I've been able to kind of watch you do all this and get into those right seats and see all the work that you've done. One of the things that is always inspiring to me is when someone who's in a corporate space, but then also still creates margin in their life for their creative outlet. And you've done that with this latest writing, which is beautifully written and very personal. And I'm wondering if you could talk to the entrepreneur or the executive who's listening right now who who wants to do the creative thing but also needs to pay the bills, and how you manage to do that, and maybe some things that we can learn from you along the way.
It as I said, it's a new season this last several years, and it was different than my previous books. So I had to get up at 5 every morning and write for an hour or two. I working for myself is a little squidgy, so I was able to sometimes fit in a little bit more room, but that's not how I have ever written in the past. So yes, I had to get up early and create the margin to write this book. And then I went into my day job and my family and the normal hours. I figured that the easiest way to carve was from sleep.
That
It's not a
sounds
long-term solution, but it
right.
it works very well in short, limited term passion projects. And as my role at Blue Hat has evolved and transitioned over the last 3 years, I have become I have fewer creative outlets at work. I used to have a lot more
Mm.
creative outlets at work. Now my creative outlet is, let's see how I can get Manus, my favorite BFF with AI, to build something out of my spreadsheet. Like we are really hard on the line of human creativity and human writing, and no AI touches the words. But if we can build an AI app for my royalty spreadsheet, awesome. So I get to put my creativity into that a little bit more, which is fun. But yeah, I think sometimes you just have to not sleep as much for a limited term.
When you enter into a creative season like that, um, how does your husband and your family deal with that version of you? Because one of the things that I know in coaching executives that as sleep goes, so does emotional regulation, so does patience, so does all of those other things. And so it's not a sacrifice that doesn't come without a cost to the people around you.
For sure. And I think you're absolutely right. And if I was doing it on the like regularly for that was my life, I don't think the
Mm.
cost would be worth it. Um, it it was something that my husband really believed in and really supported me through. And I could not have finished the project without him and his grace. And he sent me off, I think, 3 times over a year and a half to a hotel for 2 or 3 days where I would just really deeply focus and edit and finish. And I couldn't have done it without that. And we have a 7-year-old, and that is an extra, amount of love and grace.
So one of the things that you write about in this book is the process of actually writing itself. Like and this book is really about your story. And when I first met you, it was at the Oaks and we were there for a writing retreat together and it was so much fun. And I've read some of your other stuff. And so you are a really great writer, but this is a different kind of writing in the sense of like it's so much of like your trauma, your story. It's got its ups and downs. It's it's heartbreaking and joyful. It's all of those things wrapped into a package that is kind of your life. Talk to me about that sentence of like, I think every leader should have to, or every person really should have to write their own story down on paper forever and ever.
I think that the process is so valuable. And it just
Mm.
so happened that I did it in my 50th, 51st year. So, enough life to be able to look back and reevaluate your childhood and maybe clean up some old wounds with God and look at the places where your life turned. And I think we all have those um, milestones where we wanted to go right and God sent us left. And you need some distance from some of those milestones to see what was really happening. It has been it has produced the most gratitude in me. One of the processes that I have gone through that has produced the most gratitude to look back. But I think there is something about looking back in the same way that we would as entrepreneurs, just deep dive into the business and see what is happening. When you like you're just like this on daily life, but when you get a breath and you can look back and see where you have come from, and it's so fun, and we pour it into our businesses. And I don't think we do that in our lives as often. We don't give space for that kind of perspective and thoughtful reflection. I think it helps move you more healthfully and more gratefully, and being a better spouse and parent and friend and business leader, because it's a pivot point. Not like my life is over. I've written my life story at 51, but it, I don't know. It's a step up in terms of perspective.
Well, one of the interesting things about the way that you tell stories, and I think that there are a lot of leaders who are listening who want to be better storytellers, is there are some points where you dive into the details of a particular story, particularly around joy and getting out of the country and some of those kind of things. You're in the details very very much so. But then there are other parts of your life story that are a little bit more, I don't want to say flyover, but they're kind of it's not as much in the details, right? Some of the traumatic events early on in your life, right? And I'm curious, how do you decide what to go deep on, and how do you decide what to stay at 30,000 feet?
I think part of it is what you find interesting yourself. Um,
Mm.
I think trauma has marked my life. and I have learned so much from it, and I have been detoured by a lot of it. And so I don't think you can see w- where God has brought me if you don't at least see some of the pillars, or the kind of looking out across and seeing the jagged mountains. You don't see every mile of the road, but here are the high points, or the low points, however you would say. And I think in terms of what I go into detail on and what I don't, it's a work in progress. So I think you write everything. That's what I always tell our authors, and it's what I did for myself. I wrote everything, and then I edited. And
Mm.
part of the catharsis of writing everything is getting it down and getting it out of your head and out of your heart, and you're drawing out a little bit of wound that might still actually be there after 30 years. All of that. And then you take another pass and you say, is this particular part helpful to my reader? Because what I'm trying to do after I've, exploded all over the page for 700 pages, that's my part of the story. But now I want to think about my reader. What do they need to know to get the through line? And for me, the through line is God is good, and you can
Yeah.
trust him no matter what happens in the middle. So, what do you need to know about this childhood trauma? You need to know that it happened, and a couple of the details. You need to know that, I mean, there were things that I didn't say, and there were people that I didn't name, but you need to know that it happened to know why I got here. And so I think you have to think about other people, and people who maybe are alive, or people who love them are alive. And you have to think about your reader, and you don't want them to get bogged down. You're just trying to tell a good story. So it's such a good question, Tony. I don't know how you exactly decide, but
Well, I think that you're really emphasizing the idea about knowing who your reader is. And I think that that's something that a lot of us, when we send communication, even professionally, don't often think about. Like, who's my reader and what is he or she going through when they're going to be reading this? And what are they reading this for? Right.
mhm.
While this is a kind of a memoir of your life in sorts, it really is about how to understand the goodness of God in a lot of pain. Right. And so it's perfect for it seems like it would be perfect for that kind of person, that person who wants to get lost in someone else's story so that they can feel their own, but don't have to process it in that way. Is that is that a fair assessment? Is that a fair statement?
I think so. I mean, you mentioned how vulnerable it was right before you hit record, and it's excruciatingly vulnerable. But I think you have to make your reader feel welcome and make them feel like they know you, and then you walk them through your story. And
Mhm.
and they can't, if they feel like you're not being honest, or you're skating over things that they wonder about, they don't feel welcome. And I don't know. I've thought a lot about this because different generations. I just finished a book that was about World War II, and they talked about, you don't tell anybody anything. Everything's great. And that's strength. And man, I know that everybody's different, personalities are different. I just think God does amazing things. And and we encourage each other by telling our stories of the amazing things that he does. And if we don't tell our stories, then we can't encourage other people. And I can't, in all honesty, tell you this really cool part without you understanding that there was this really terrible part too. And
Yeah.
it's not, and I want to be honest. And I want you to, I think we talked about this on our last call, that Christian fiction when I was growing up was very much, you know, there's not a lot of wrestling. And that
Mm.
was not my experience. I wrestled as I ran headlong away from God. I wrestled as I ran away from the church and those terrible church people. Um, and he came and brought me back. And I think there's a lot of people who need to hear that story.
One of the things that I appreciated was the um, the imagery that you created around the flannel graph. And so I think that's kind of how you brought everybody in. It lasts for a couple of different chapters, and then there's kind of this moment, a little one of the like it seems like a turning point moment. Will you talk to us first of all? I think there's probably some people listening who didn't know what a flannel graph was, and so could you talk to us a little bit about what a flannel graph is and why it was the perfect way to welcome people into your story?
Flannel graph. So when I was growing up in the church, there was always little Sunday school and little Mrs. So and so because it was always a Mrs. And flannel graph was a piece of material across a board, and then you had these little characters, felt characters or something, cut out, and you would move them across the board to tell the story. Very high tech. It was awesome. And it was super, as you can imagine, it gives like the high points, not like theological detail. So that's how I welcomed people into my story because I wanted to give the main characters, and it it was a very good representation in my mind of what I thought of Jesus when I was growing up, kind of the impression that I was half taught and half caught in evangelicalism growing up. And then there's a point with, I think, almost everyone who is honestly wrestling with life in as we have it is flannel graph Jesus falls off, and he is not enough. And you have to decide, am I going to investigate the real living, breathing, difficult to understand Jesus, or am I going to walk off?
It's so good. I think that I love this as something that just makes it's so easy to see. I think in communication, we often forget that our mind's eye is such a powerful projector of what we're reading and feeling and understanding. Let's say that you're talking to somebody who is the director of operations for a home services company, right? Maybe it's a roofing company or air conditioning company. And they're just like, I hear what you're talking about, Tony and Jody. I'm not that creative. What are some things that they can do to like work on that idea of creating pictures that help bring people along?
Fantastic question. This is my mind going blank. I went to a class probably 20 years ago, and we talked about bringing Jesus into the marketplace.
Mm,
And that was um, incredibly different from my experience in Bible college, where I didn't learn anything about Jesus outside of the church door. So it's super helpful. But I think you have to look for ways to love people and serve people. And I think there are metaphors in roofing, and there are metaphors for how Jesus loves us in plumbing, and there are metaphors for how he loves us in retail sales. You just need to you're looking for a translatable point. I lived overseas about half of my adult life, and I learned Spanish, and then I learned Turkish, and I was in a lot of different countries where I didn't speak the language. And I think that's the what you're looking for in communication and storytelling, in connecting with your person across from you, is a translatable nugget. And it does not matter what language you use. You just need to find the way to connect to them. I think you can use any industry. I think those nuggets are there. You just have to look for them with that mindset.
yeah, I think the other thing that a lot of people miss out on is they just don't write them down. And so there's
Yeah.
so many things that you could notice throughout the course of a day that like it's easy to say when you put somebody on the spot and say, "Hey, give me a metaphor about God." You're like, but if you're like all day I'm looking for metaphors about God, then all of a sudden the metaphor becomes much easier to tell. Right? When I'm in writing mode and not just listening mode, like when I'm in thinking mode, like all of a sudden I'm like, I got to and I use voice notes because I'm a a talker more than I am a writer. Naturally, I'm a verbal processor, an oral processor rather than just a written one. So like I'll just talk on my phone for minutes or it seems like hours, my wife would say, but but that, I do you notice more when you're in writing mode?
No, I'm a noticer. I'm not
Yeah.
observant. My daughter can always points that out, but I'm a noticer of of metaphor. I'm all what I see, this is where my husband notices that I write poetry because I get a line, I'm out and I see a tree and I get a line through my head and I have to like I tippity tippity tapping it out on my phone. But I think you're right about having to write it down. And
Mhm.
we did that in Turkey because it was important to us to let people know that we love Jesus. Like that was something that we wanted to do in Turkish was very hard. And um so we practiced. And I think that that's just part of normal life when you're trying to connect to people in different subcultures who speak slightly different dialects, with the culture that they're in is you think about it and you write things down and you practice and you say I'm going to throw this out there and see how that goes.
One of the things that I appreciate about the way that you um, put the book together is that there's 5 different parts to the book, and each part is a different section of your life, right? And so and then there's the game, and then joy, and then exceedingly great joy, and then consider it all joy, and that kind of process of chopping it up. And I was curious as I was if I was sitting across from somebody who was going to write their story, how do you decide where to chop it?
You hand it to your editor.
That's such a great answer, right? Because we need people.
We need people. The only reason I wrote this book was because my friends and family would not stop talking about our story, our
Mm.
adoption story. And then God told me to get on it when we were at the Oaks together. And so I said, fine. And I started it. Um, but and that's why I started. I was only going to tell my side of our adoption story. But then to understand the miracles, you have to go back and you have to go back. So I ended up writing a little bit of a memoir, which I never wanted to write in my whole life. And I never wanted to write this much of one. So it all, it all turned out great. But I think you have to give it away. Whether it's at the point I said where you write 700 pages and then you give it to somebody, or whether you can self-edit, because, some people can self-edit, some people can't. It doesn't matter. But yeah, I think you need other people because another person who is not so tied up in your own passion project, you need that emotional distance to say, you know what? This is so important for you, but your reader does not need this 300 pages. I always think, did you ever read Les Mis? He needed an editor, man. He had like 150 pages on the side
I
trip.
never read it. I'm
It's
not that
a great
committed.
book. It's a great book. But we all need editors, even the greats.
One of the interesting things about this whole journey that you've been on is this book comes out on tomorrow officially, right? June 16th is the official date of the book release. Is that right?
It was June 12th. It was the
June
day
12th. Okay.
our previous schedule. Yeah.
Recording date. Right. So this, um, the Feast of Joy is on June 24th.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you can talk about what that is and why it matters so much. And I just think it's such a great there's one line that you have, and I have it up on my screen. It says, "Every once in a while, a move of God is just so powerful, you just have to keep celebrating." Tell us about the Feast of Joy.
Okay, so I wrote a whole book about it. I don't know if you knew, but I'll tell you that. So we were in Turkey adopting our daughter, and we were stuck for a zillion years because of COVID and because of a coup. And we finally finished our adoption, thank the Lord, and we were on our way out. We hadn't been home in 4 years. Our daughter had never left Turkey because she was stateless and all of that. June 12th, we went to the airport because we had our permission and we had our visa for her, and they denied us exit. They wouldn't let her leave. And it was the one of the worst days of our lives. And we ended up it ended up that our State Department threw us under the bus, and that's a whole different part of the story. But we were little pawns in a big government wrestling match. So a lot of things happened in that intervening window, but through a great miraculous Red Sea parting, we got out of Turkey on the 24th, and we arrived in LA. My parents had driven down there, my brother's down there, and we got like welcome to America to our daughter. And so we celebrate June 24th, and we started out this, continual feast or whatever it is in the Old Testament. We just felt like in our, in what we have experienced in life, this was as close to a biblical miracle as we have ever seen, and we wanted to remember. And it says all over the place in the Old Testament, write this down. Tell your children when they ask you why
Yeah.
we're doing this, tell them why we're doing this. And we're having our fourth annual Feast of Joy next week. And we invite a whole bunch of our friends and family, and we do some sort of, like festival ribs or tri-tip or something. And then everybody brings a feast item and we just celebrate. And this year, it's always been about our story, but this year we're having everybody pass the mic around. And what is your joy moment that you want to celebrate? I think
Mm.
I think we need to remember, and we need to tell our children, because we are so forgetful.
How much of the book I mean, obviously Joy's still young, so, like, how much of the book have you shared with her? How was her part in the process? She sounds like she's already got quite a bit of opinions, which wouldn't surprise me, and so, like, how's that process been of sharing that with your young one?
She's 7, and so she knows that I wrote it. And my husband and I, very intentionally looked at the book in light of the fact that she would read it someday. And it was important that we be clear that this is, my story. This is my side of the story. It's not her story. She'll tell her story when she wants to. Um, it was an interesting facet of the writing to think she's going to read this one day. And I want her to read it. I don't want her to be hurt in any way, but I want her to read it and know that this was really hard and that we would do it all again. Like
Mm,
every single bit of the horror was worth it, because she's playing out in the backyard right now.
it's amazing. So good. Um, when writing something like this, I can imagine it feels very different when it gets out in the open, right? Like you've written books before, and There that's in itself, quite the undertaking, but writing something that's so personal and so vulnerable and has so much involved in it, what's it been like? Is it, and I've watched on, I think, Instagram as it's kind of I've seen it hit more hands, and I feel emotional for you, right? Like, it's that whole process is what's it been like? What's your perspective on it all, and watching all your family and friends get kind of a peeled back version of your life that most of them probably didn't know a lot of.
It's ghastly. Let's just be completely honest. It's ghastly. It's, yeah. This is like my eighth book or something, and all my fiction is very personal, but with the veil of fiction, you can you have a little bit of distance. So you're right. It's
Yeah.
very different. And it has been, um, it has, it has been surprisingly terrible. It, I mean, you ask for honesty. That's what you,
I said, look, I listen. Look, I thought I was gonna like it more than I did. I did not like it. So I
yeah,
agree.
it's not, I mean, yeah, it's just hard. And there's nothing in there that is surprising to the people that I love.
Yeah.
There's nothing in there that is a shock. It's not like big revelation. I had all this secret life. Uh, I had a secret life, and but my people who love me know it's old history. So it's not
Yeah.
any kind of shocking, but yeah, it's the most vulnerable thing I have ever written by a mile, and it's taken some time to adjust to that, and I would say I'm still adjusting a little bit. I've had a lot of really positive feedback, so far, but, it's an adjustment for sure.
Okay, so I have 2 questions for you, left. The first one is where can people pick up their copy of the book? What's the best way to support you in that adventure if they want to lean into that?
They can go to jodicowles.com, and there's a link there. It's not, for a whole different slew of reasons. It's not on Amazon right now, but it's available at bluehatpublishing.com. And so you can go to either jodicowles.com or bluehatpublishing.com and buy it there. It's available internationally on Amazon, and it'll be available on Amazon here pretty shortly, but there's some, you know, issues.
Issues. Amazon has issues. That's different. Wait, that's a whole different podcast, friends. If you're
Yeah, yeah.
listening, Amazon's a whole different. If you're an author, it's just a whole different place. Okay, Jodi. The last question we're asking people this year is about the greatest leader that they know, somebody who they've met in person. We would love to have you introduce us to that person and what makes him or her so special.
I have been led by a couple great men, my dad and my husband, and they are very different and they lead very differently. But I think what I admire about both of them is how much they value um, my mom and myself.
Mm.
How I've seen my dad value my mom and value her opinion and make decisions with her. And I saw that teamwork growing up my whole life. And so I think that was part of what I was looking for, and why it took so long to find him. But my husband is an amazing leader. He is a shepherd and he cares for his flock, whoever it is. He's incredibly loyal, and he is much more concerned about the health of his flock than he is about making a name for himself or having anyone know who he is. He he I mean, I just admire the heck out of him. He's 100% supportive and and leads, not
Yeah.
in the you know the bad leaders are the ones that come to mind, and he stands in stark contrast to them. He's not, he doesn't just hammer his way through. So, my husband.
That's so good. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Jodi, I am so thankful for the time that we get to spend together. So please continue to write so you can keep coming back on the podcast. I appreciate your perspective and the way that you look at the world and the words that you put into it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Wow, what a great conversation. I'm so thankful for her heart. I'm thankful for Jodi's ability to tell stories and her gift of writing. I think one of the things all of us need to wrestle with is what should we be writing? What should we be noticing? How do we improve that skill of communication? And the coaching question for this week: Are you keeping your reader in mind? Are you keeping your listener in mind? All of us could do a better job at that. As always, I'm forever thankful for you, the bold ones. Without you, none of this would be worthwhile. So, hey, do me a favor. Send me your feedback, tony@twmilt.com. Share this episode with a friend. And remember, if you want to follow Jesus, you must be willing to move.